Our Heavenly Father, we are grateful for our time together today, and thank you for our class. Thank you for the many blessings you've given to us this week, for the healings, for the opportunity for the surgery, the opportunity to get better, and thank you for Robin and her improvement in the hospital, and thank you for just the holiday that we have to celebrate and relax a little bit, spend time with families. Thank you for our birthday parties and all the fun that we've had. I just pray, Lord, that you would just be with us as we go through this material today and just guide our conversation. And we pray in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right. So as I mentioned, I did not have time to put together a PowerPoint presentation. So we're doing this old school, and I'll probably, if I glance over at Tyler, I'll just have him come up and start. No. I'm actually yeah. So actually, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, not a whole lot, but he also did work through some of the same information as part of the class project that he did for Dr. Klingler. So he is familiar with some of this, but we are looking at chapter 24 and chapter 25 in Deuteronomy. So the primary things we want to look at in this passage or in these two chapters is we want to we're going to look at it, what does it say, but we also then want to go into the book of Ruth. There's a lot of connection between these two chapters and the book of Ruth, where the concepts of gleaning and the kinsman redeemer, those concepts that are taught here really play out well in the book of Ruth. So we'll take a look at that. But there's a few other things here. If we start in chapter 24, it starts out with some general statutes about divorce. Divorce was apparently a widespread problem in the Near East during this time. What I want to say is these are not, I'm not sure what the term is, it's not a prescriptive about divorce because God hates divorce. Some people, times people look at this and say, well, look at this, God acknowledges and but no, God hates divorce, and he's putting these statutes in place to recognize what's already happening in the culture. So if this happens, then this is how you handle the situation. So the main thing in this chapter, it's not an extensive teaching on divorce, but it says if a man divorces his wife and she remarries, and then later that husband divorces her or dies, then she cannot go back to her previous husband. She has been defiled. And that's the main rule or principle to get out of this particular passage in Deuteronomy 24. And that's through verse 4. And then we start on a different section here, which is really where we want to focus, starting in chapter 6. The heading in my Bible says, "Remember you were slaves in Egypt." Which is interesting. That is the ultimate, but it's a collection of rules about how to treat others, how to treat the poor and afflicted among us. So just going through here, I'm just going to read through here and listen for some of the things that it teaches us about how we are supposed to treat others, the less privileged, the poor, the afflicted among us. So it says, "No one shall take a handmill or an upper millstone in pledge, for he would be taking a life in pledge." Actually, I'll just stop at each verse rather than reading the whole thing. What do we glean from that particular verse?
Like it's their livelihood, or
exactly? Yeah. So a millstone is used to grind the meals, and if you were to take that away from a person, you're essentially taking away their means of provision or their means to provide for themselves or to cook. In verse 7, it says, "If a man is caught kidnapping any of his brothers of the sons of Israel, and he mistreats him or sells him, then that thief shall die, and you shall purge the evil from among you." So apparently kidnapping was also a common practice. But it's not kidnapping just in the same sense that we would think of kidnapping, or if you extend the thought process in this verse, what is he talking about? what does he eventually do with the person he kidnaps?
Mistreat, abuse.
Mistreating,
Or even
but more
selling,
importantly,
yeah.
what?
Selling.
Selling. So what does it mean to sell somebody? You're selling him into slavery, typically, is what this verse is really inferring. So selling the person into slavery is essentially depriving that person, again, of their livelihood and, you know, putting them into slavery. And that person should be, the thief should be punished. Not only just punished, but punished by death. So it's a very severe crime to kidnap and sell somebody or put them into slavery. Verses 8 and 9. So this is you know, just some teaching about leprosy. Take care against an infection of leprosy, to be very careful and to do according to all the Levitical priests instruct you. If you go on to verse 9, it says, remember that Yahweh your God, remember what Yahweh did to Miriam on the way as you're out of Egypt. What did he do to Miriam? Comes from Numbers, but do you remember what happened to Miriam? She was afflicted with leprosy. Why?
For desiring the authority of Moses.
For
complaining against
For
Moses.
complaining again. Okay, I thought you said desiring the
I
authority.
did too. I was like,
Yeah, so, but defying the authority.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought I was gonna have an opportunity to correct Tyler here. No, she didn't desire the authority, she defied his authority, and for defying his authority and the authority of the law, you know, she was struck with leprosy. So then moving on to verses 10 through 15, I kind of labeled this as treatment of the poor or the less privileged. And there's a couple of sections in here. Verses 10 through 13 talk about loans. So it says, when you make your neighbor a loan of any sort, you shall not enter into his house to take his deposit. Instead, you shall stand outside, and the man to whom you've made the loan shall bring a deposit to you. Now, if he is an afflicted man, you shall not sleep with his deposit. Actually, let's stop at, well, okay, let's keep going. You shall not sleep with his deposit. When the sun goes down, you shall surely return the deposit to him, and so he may sleep in his cloak and bless you. It will be righteousness for you before Yahweh your God. So if you are a lender and you go to a person's home to collect the deposit, you don't go into the home. Why would that be?
Home invasion.
But yeah, I think it protects the dignity or the dignity of the individual. If I want to give you collateral for a loan, I'm going to go into my home and I'm going to find something I can offer you as collateral. But if I invite you to come into my home, you're going to be looking around and
Exactly.
you're going to, okay, I'll take that, and also you're going to have maybe a different perspective of what that person's ability is. So it influences a transaction if you enter that person's home. So to prevent that and prevent people from being taken advantage of, the lender stays outside and allows the borrower, to offer a collateral. Now, we also see what happens if the collateral that the borrower brings is his cloak. What should you do?
It's the same thing. Return it. It's livelihood again. It's their ability to, sleep at night.
Right, but can you accept it as collateral?
Yeah, you can.
You can accept it,
Yeah.
but then you return it to him at night.
Yeah.
So that, that person's cloak is their ability to stay warm and potentially stay alive at
Mm-hmm.
night. So you don't want to prevent or prevent that person's livelihood.
Yeah.
That
So-
kind of looks like grace. That kind of reminds me of grace, like that they would, like you owe me, but I'm actually going to give to you to make sure you're okay at the same time.
Mhm. Right,
And the trust that it's still the collateral.
yeah,
So I expect you to give it back to me in the morning,
right,
Like
yeah,
I'm gonna give this to you tonight, but there's enough trust that you'll give it back in the morning.
Which is why I think the word righteousness shows up in there, because it's faith.
Yeah.
Faith always produces righteousness.
that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yep, that's good. And then verses 14 and 15 talk about wages. You shall not oppress a hired person who is afflicted and needy, And the word afflicted, I think, is just means poor. The best I could ascertain. The person who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your brothers or one of your sojourners who is in your land within your gates. You shall give him his wages. You shall give him his wages on his day before the sun goes down, for he is afflicted and sets his soul on it. In other words, this is a guy who's living day to day. He needs his wages every day to go and provide food for his family, or to provide the shelter he needs, or whatever. So he's living day to day, and you should not deprive him of his wages that he needs so he can, support his family. And then verses 16, sins of the father and son. Basically, this is, the father and the son are each responsible for their own sins. The father's not punished for the sins of his son, and the sons are not punished for the sins of his father, for which I am thankful. No.
How did you get around the conflict of like the verses where it says like, and they'll be punished to this generation?
So I say that, ask the question again?
Like the verses where it talks about where they're gonna be punished for their fathers, like to generations, multiple generations.
In Exodus 34, you'll visit this thing to the third and fourth generation.
I think there are consequences to actions. So and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but I think the decisions I make as a father are going to impact Tyler and his family. The fact that, good or bad, my decisions are going to impact him, and they're going to impact his children going forward. And those decisions will follow through for multiple generations. My sins, if I'm just trying to think of an example. If I commit a sin and I'm in prison or something like that, well, that's going to impact my kids, and they're going to reap that punishment. Although they're not quote unquote paying for the crime, they are still reaping the consequences of my decisions, if that makes sense.
So this verse also in particular says, fathers shall not be put to death because of their children, and children shall not be put to death because of their fathers. So, to your point, there's a consequence going on generations, but you can't have multiple generations if everyone's dead.
I also think it's sort of like vengeance. Vengeance is not wrong because the Lord enacts vengeance, but it is wrong for us. So he says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. You don't take vengeance. And in the same way, Ham is cursed. Not because of anything Ham did. David's children are cursed, not because of anything that they did, but because of David's sin. So the Lord does sometimes visit the sins of the fathers on the children, but that's the Lord's right, and we're not to do that.
I've heard alcoholism used as an example, because if you have an alcoholic father, I heard you're more prone to alcoholism
That's a good example
yourself,
too.
and then it's just harder on.
Yeah, and that's one of those natural consequences that follow us through multiple generations. Verses 17 and 18 says, you shall not pervert justice due to a sojourner or an orphan, or take the widow's garment in pledge, but you shall remember, let me stop there. You shall not pervert justice. What does this remind you of? I think in Deuteronomy 10, we talked about we talked about justice, I believe, in chapter 10. I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. But I'll just skip down, verse 18. Verse 18, it says, but you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and that Yahweh your God redeemed you from there. All of these verses, starting in verse 6 all the way down to 17, the theme that I see here is we're talking about those who are less privileged, or the opportunity for somebody, for Israel, to take advantage of another person, to put that person in, to sell them into slavery, or to treat them unjustly in the court system, to treat them unfairly in a loan agreement and things like that. So all of those things are opportunities where Israel has an opportunity to show character and reflect God's character. He says, remember, you were once a slave, and I redeemed you out of Egypt. So this is how you should be treating those around you. And I think that's the takeaway from that section, those verses. That's
That is
the
what
common
it says, that is what it says in chapter 10 that you're thinking.
Okay,
18 and 19, verses 18.
okay,
It's
good.
also the parable of the unmerciful servant. When he begged his master to forgive him this debt, and he did.
Yeah.
And then his fellow servant had a tiny amount, but he was unmerciful to him.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so let's move on to our next section here. And this is really the meat of what we want to talk about, starting at verse 19.
It's not the manna,
It's what?
it's not the manna.
The manna? No, this is the meat. Okay. So starting at verse 19, it says, when you reap your harvest in your field, and you've forgotten the sheaf in the field, you shall not go back and get it. It shall be for the sojourner, for the orphan, for the widow, in order that Yahweh your God may bless you in all the works of your hands. When you beat the olive tree, you shall not go over the boughs after you finish. It shall be for the sojourner, for the orphan, and for the widow. When you gather the grapes in your vineyard, you shall not glean it after you finish. It shall be for the sojourner, for the orphan, and for the widow. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this thing. So what are the, actually before we go there, Wendy, did you look up Deuteronomy 10?
I did, yeah.
Verses 17, can you read that, verses 17 and 19?
For the Lord your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who does not show partiality nor take a bribe. He executes justice for the orphan and the widow, and shows his love for the alien by giving him food and clothing. So show your love for the alien, for you are aliens in the land of Egypt.
Okay, so this is the partiality. That's what I was trying to think of a minute ago. So God does not show partiality. In verse 18, he says he executes justice for the orphan and the widow and shows love to the sojourner by giving him food and clothing. This ties back to what we just read in verses 6 through 18, that how we treat others. God shows compassion and justice for the sojourner and those among us. And then verse 19 also reflects back to verse 19, is it 18 or 19? In verse 18 that we just read a minute ago, but you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt. In chapter 10 it says, you know, show love to the sojourner, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. God keeps reminding us, you were slaves, you were sojourners. This is how, and I redeemed you, I took care of you. This is now how you're to be treating other people. So God set the example for us. So looking back at back into chapter 24, what rules do we see here about gleaning? What's the rule that's given?
Don't do it.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't do it a second time, like don't
yeah.
go back through and make sure you've,
Yeah, if
Picked or collected
you drop
everything.
some, you drop it and you leave it. You don't go back and pick it up again, okay? What else? Couple of little things here. Corners, supposed to leave the corners open. You know, don't harvest the corners.
I think there's generosity that's supposed to be good. It's like, you have plenty, okay? You don't have to go back and get every scrap. Leave some for those who have nothing.
Okay, so yes, there is an issue of generosity. Where does the generosity come from? What's the real issue here?
Well, God has blessed them, so
God-
they are to bless others.
Okay, but God's the provider. God's saying, you know, you can leave this. You know, it's an act of faith. You know, you leave the sheaves on the ground for the sojourners, for the widows, the orphans to collect. You leave the corners because ultimately I'm providing for you anyway. So you don't have to worry about your provision. This also reflects Leviticus 23. The same principle comes out of Leviticus 23. Let's see. Further, if any grain is harvested and falls to the ground, it may not be picked up, but it's rather be left behind for others to glean. And then we looked at Deuteronomy chapter 10, 17 through 19, talks about the treatment of widows and orphans as well. All right, so we're going to skip over to the book of Ruth, and we're going to look at chapter 2 and see how this plays out with Boaz, Naomi, and Ruth. So let's skip over here. I'm actually just going to go ahead Our study says just read verses 6 and 7, but I'm just going to go ahead and read in context here. It says, now Naomi, starting with verse 1, and I just lost my place here. I skipped up chapter 4. So starting in verse 1. Now Naomi had a kinsman, actually it's a little bit of background. Naomi had moved to Moab. She was in the family of Elimelech, and during famine in Jerusalem, they moved to Moab in order to provide for her family. And she had 2 sons. Her 2 sons married Moabite women. Naomi's husband passed away, and her 2 sons also passed away, leaving her daughters-in-law, without husbands. So she's now heard that, God has now blessed Israel, and I can return and provide for my family. So she is returning, and Naomi's daughter-in-law, Ruth, decides to return with her. So that sets us up where we are here. It says, now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a mighty man of excellence in the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth, the Moabitess, said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after one whom I may find favor in his eyes. And she said to her, go, my daughter. So she went, and she came and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and it so happened that she happened to come to the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, may Yahweh be with you. And they said to him, may Yahweh bless you. Then Boaz said to the young man who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? He thought she was one of the workers, the phrasing, whose young woman is this? The young woman is a charge, the young man in charge of the reapers replied, she is the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather from the reapers among the slaves. Thus she came, pardon?
Among the sheaves.
Among the sheaves. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with, I just think this is easier. Then she came and remained among, from the morning until now, and she has been sitting in the house for a little while. So she started early. We don't know what time of day this is, but she had been working diligently all morning, and she is sitting in the house. The house was probably a shack for the workers where they could, rest and recuperate a little bit. So she only sat there for a little while. Idea, she's a hard worker. Then Boaz said to Ruth, have you not heard, my daughter? Do not go and glean in another field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but stay here with my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the young men not to touch you. And if you are thirsty, Go to the water jars and drink from what the young men draw. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, Why have I found favor in your sight, that you may take notice of me, though I am a foreigner? And Boaz replied to her, All that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you forsook your father and your mother in the land of your birth, and came to a people whom you did not previously know. Okay, so listening to this, let's what does Boaz know about Ruth?
Chapter 1 of Ruth. That's about all he knows.
Okay, but based off of these verses, what do we?
Go on these
Just
verses.
what the men have told him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he knows what the men have told him. So, but what did they tell him, or what can he glean from this? We know that she's a sojourner. She came from Moab. That's in verses 6 and 11.
Selfless.
Pardon?
Selfless.
She's selfless. She's a hard worker.
She's a widow.
She's a widow. We know that in verse 11. She has forsaken her home and her country. He knew that about her. And another thing I put, it's a minor.
She follows the rules. She's polite.
Right. She asks permission.
Exactly.
Right. So she's a rule follower. She has integrity.
She's a relative by marriage.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to kind of emphasize even more on what my wife said, which is that the cultural norm would have been for her to just, the cultural norm and the easy path would have just been go back and live with her father and mother until she found another man and then remarry and blah, 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 blah. But like, she actually went like unbelievably out of her way to stay with Naomi because she knew if she left Naomi would probably be destitute.
Mhm.
I mean, even more so than just them two together. And so the fact that she decided to travel with her fully to, back to Naomi's whole town, stay with her there, and like, I mean, again, just, there's someone out there in the modern day who has some type of that level of sacrificial comparison, but it would be a very, very rare person to find someone there.
And she doesn't just do it for Naomi's sake. Boaz says in verse 12 that she has sought refuge under the wings of Yahweh, the God of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also the element of faith that she really does believe that the God of Naomi is her God.
Yep. Yeah. So, and Boaz says he recognizes what she has done. He recognized this about her, that she left her homeland. She, was committed to Naomi, and all those factors that you're mentioning. We also see that she is a hard worker. She's worked since morning. She's only rested briefly. So we see that Ruth is a woman of great character. But in a minute, we're also going to see that Boaz is also a man of great character. So looking back at chapter 24, how are those rules about gleaning, how are those reflected in this story? We read the rules about gleaning at the end of chapter 24. We're not talking about the kinsman redeemer part yet, we're just talking about gleaning.
I mean, Boaz does a good job of holding the law in that area. He's allowing it in his field, and
Yeah.
his overseers are following his example and also allow it.
Right. So he's setting up so that she can follow and glean. Does part of what I wanted to show, he goes above and beyond. What else does he offer her?
Water and food.
Water.
Yeah.
She gets to drink from the same pots that the workers get to drink from. She's not limited to, the dirty water or she's got clean pots. She can drink from those pots.
Also, you've got, the way the story begins, it's just bad and gets worse. You have an Israelite woman who leaves the land of blessing when there's a famine. Which a famine is a sign of covenant curse. If there's a famine in the land, it should be a sign to repent, not to flee to another land. But she goes to another land, and then everyone dies. which should be another sign. But the Lord has given bread to Bethlehem, the house of bread, so she goes back. But she advises her daughters-in-law to return and worship their false gods. So that, like, everything, no one's doing the right thing. Naomi is very bad in the opening scenes of this book. And then at the end she says, yeah, call me Mara. God's dealt bitterly with me. Despite, she's just been a lawbreaker, line after line after line. And then you come to Ruth and Boaz, and Ruth seems to know the law. She seems to know that she has the right to glean from the field. And Boaz keeps the law and goes above and beyond. So here you have Ruth and Boaz are the first two characters to know and keep the law in this book.
I feel like you might be a little bit harder on Naomi just for the fact that her husband
Her
left away. And she could have definitely been like, oh yeah, let's do this, you know, like, so we don't know her heart behind it, but
But she also had no choice but to go.
yes.
She had no choice but to go, but she's still not portrayed positively in this section.
Yes.
So I'm gonna ask somebody else to read for me. Can someone get Deuteronomy 5, verses 5 through 10?
Yep. 5 through 10.
So just to set us up, these are, it's a reference to the kinsman redeemer rule. That's what we're gonna be looking at.
In Deuteronomy 5?
Deuteronomy 25, I'm sorry, 25, 5 through 10.
Okay, because I was like, that's the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
I
okay.
was just looking at the 5 on my notes here.
What's 5 of the 10 Commandments?
There is a 5 in there.
Yeah, it's
I just forgot the 20.
Okay, so 25, 5 through 10. When brothers live on the same property and one of them dies without a son, the wife of the dead man may not marry a stranger outside the family. Her brother-in-law is to take her as his wife, have sexual relations with her, and perform the duty of a brother-in-law for her. The first son she bears will carry on the name of the dead brother, so his name will not be blotted out from Israel. But if the man does not want to marry his sister-in-law, she must go to the elders at the city gate and say, my brother-in-law refuses to preserve his brother's name in Israel. He isn't willing to perform the duty of a brother-in-law for me. The elders of his city will summon him and speak with him. If he persists and says, I don't want to marry her, then his sister-in-law will go up to him in the sight of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, and spit in his face. Then she will, that just cracks me up. Then she will declare, this is what is done to a man who will not build up his brother's house. And his family name in Israel will be called the house of the man whose sandal has been removed.
I thought that was interesting too, the spitting in the face. And I've actually wondered, what is the purpose of that? But it is the only thing I can think of, and I don't know if you have any other insight about this, but that if you are a candidate for a redeemer and you willingly allow the woman to spit in your face, I mean, that's sort of like a covenant, like that's, you accepted that, you know, it's public acceptance of that, of your rejection. I don't know if you have any, why the spitting, I don't know.
I've always thought of it as just, it's shame.
It is that, but it's also, yeah. But I guess if it's shame, if it's just that, why would why would the potential kinsman stand there and subject himself to it? To me, it's almost like, okay, everybody, she spit on me, that's done. You know, it's like seals the deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's done under the coercion of the elders of the city, you know, like he's obligated to be there.
So it is an interesting thing. I've pondered that too, as far as the spitting in the face and the removing the sandal and all that. It's just kind of odd little ritual there, I guess. But so anyway, at this point, we want to do is we want to jump back into Ruth. These are the rules of kinsman redeemer. don't think we have time to read all of the verses in Ruth. I think this is a story that most of us are somewhat familiar with, but I'm gonna go ahead and let's see. Let's go, I'll read through chapter 3, and then, yeah, well, actually, we'll just see how far we can get. Because this is all, we want to see how does this play out between Boaz and Ruth. So in chapter 3, starting with verse 1, then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek a state of rest for you, that it may be well with you?" A state of rest is like finding a home and a family, a place to be settled. And now, is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose young woman you were? Behold, he is winnowing barley at the threshing floor tonight. So you shall wash yourself and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and you shall go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Let it be that when he lies down, you shall know the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do. Verse 5. She said to her, "All that you say I will do." And she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all her mother-in-law had commanded her. And Boaz ate and drank, and his heart was merry, and he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. Then it happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your maidservant. So spread your wing over your maidservant, for you are a kinsman redeemer." And he said, "May you be blessed of Yahweh, my daughter. You have shown your last loving kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether rich or poor or rich. So now, my daughter, do not fear. All that you say I will do for you, for my people within the gates, for all my people within the gates of the city know that you are a woman of excellence." So he again affirms her character here. But now it is true that a kinsman redeemer, for it is true that I am a kinsman redeemer. However, there is a kinsman redeemer closer than I. So there is another relative who is a qualified redeemer ahead of Boaz. So this night, it will stay this night. It will be in the morning that if he will redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not desire to redeem you, then I will redeem you, as Yahweh lives. Lie down until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, and rose before one could recognize another, and said, "Let it be known that the woman came. Let it be known that the woman came to the. Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Give me the cloak that is on you, and hold it." So she held it, and he measured 6 measures of barley and placed it on her, and she went to the city. Then she came to her mother-in-law and said, "How did it go, my daughter?" And she told her all that the man had done for her. So I'm going to stop there. What do we see about Boaz and his following of the law of the kinsman redeemer? Is he obeying the law? Is he following the rules?
I would say yes, because there's someone that's closer to her, so
Right.
he would have the first right of refusal, I guess.
Yeah. So he's following what the commandment says about kinsman redeemer. He is also an honorable person. He's not taking advantage of Ruth in any way, and he honors her. He gives her barley to take back to provide for Naomi, and then he also says, if we're following the law, there's another person that we need to consult with before I can take you as my wife. So he said, we'll do that in the morning. So he's expedient. He doesn't put her off. He deals with it. So he's being an honorable person at this point.
Yeah. And he's treating her with honor too, because he protects her reputation.
Exactly. That's a good point. All right, so the next day, next morning, Ruth 4. Now Boaz, starting again, verse 1, now Boaz went up to the gate and sat there, and behold, the kinsman redeemer to whom, of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. Which I always thought was kind of interesting. Does he just happen to know? Maybe this was a common route, but he goes to the gate and his other kinsman just happens to be walking by. Always thought that was a little bit curious. But he said to the other person, turn aside, my fellow, sit down here. And he turned aside and he sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here, and they sat down. And he said to the kinsman redeemer, Naomi has come back from the fields of Moab, has to sell the portion of the field which belonged to our brother Elimelech. So I thought to uncover this matter in your hearing, saying, acquire it before those who are sitting here, before the elders of my people, if you will redeem it. But if no one redeems it, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am after you. And Boaz said, and he said, and I will redeem it. Boaz said, on the day that you acquire the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of the one who has died, in order to raise up the name of the one who has died on behalf of his inheritance. So the kinsman redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself. I cannot redeem it. So the eligible kinsman refused to be the redeemer. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the right of redemption and the exchange of land to establish any matter. A man removed his sandal and gave it to another, and this was a matter of attestation in Israel. So the kinsman redeemer said to Boaz, acquire this for yourself, and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses today that I have acquired all that belongs to Elimelech, and all that belongs to the Chilion and Mahlon, those are her sons, from the hand of Naomi. And also I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife, in order to raise up in the name of the one who has died, on behalf of his inheritance, so the name of the one who has died will not be cut off from his brothers from the gate of his birthplace. You are witnesses today. So just jumping ahead a little bit, Ruth and Boaz did have a child who was Obed. And who is Obed?
The father of
Jesse, father of David.
Yeah. So this is the line of Jesus, or coming to fruition here. So, so what do we see about Boaz and his behavior in light of what we see about the kinsman redeemer?
He knows the law, he does the law, he doesn't hide anything, he's very forthright, he just goes for it.
Yep. He behaves righteously, he follows the law, he goes above and beyond. We see a lot of good character qualities in Boaz. Is Boaz a illustration of our Redeemer?
Yeah.
Sorry. So he is, so he is a type of Christ in this example, where he shows, the redemption for, again, I kind of lost my train of thought here, but he shows the redemption for Naomi and Ruth, and redeeming them from almost certain slavery or hardship, but he does redeem them.
One of the things I think is interesting is that the near kinsman says that he doesn't want to ruin his own inheritance. And there's great irony there, because the inheritance that he's passed over is David the king, and ultimately Christ. And he doesn't get named. In 4:1, when Boaz says, "Turn aside, my fellow," or it gets translated a number of different ways, but it's the Hebrew word that's like such and such. Turn aside so and so. So the narrator goes
What's
out
his
of
bucket?
Exactly. That's
Exactly.
that's where I was going. The Hebrew word here is what's his bucket.
Yeah.
yeah, basically. And so there's the narrator is going out of his way to not name,
This guy.
which goes back to the law that he will be known as the one whose sandal was removed and spit in his face. So there's a subtle shaming of this person.
Yeah, and I've actually thought about this. Do you have a right? Right is not really the right term because you could do it. But I think the expectation for the kinsman redeemer is that you fulfill the duties of the kinsman redeemer. So this person, the first person, was unfaithful. See, he should have fulfilled that role, but he said, "No, I'm not willing to."
Well, but since Boaz said, if you don't, I'm going to, you think that gave him an out, kind of?
Probably did, but it doesn't mean you should have taken it.
But it still doesn't absolve him of, his responsibility was to be the kinsman redeemer, and he did not fulfill that responsibility.
He would have done it for the land, but now, that land has to go to Ruth and not to my children? Well, then I'm not willing.
Yeah. So it could also be that Boaz was a very wise person, apparently, and he knew a lot of people. He probably knew that this person would do exactly what he did. He probably knew that ahead of time, but he also knew the rules, the law. He said, "We're going to go and give him the opportunity. Say, here, if you don't do it, I will."
Yeah, Boaz's conversation, half the conversation, is very cheeky, in my opinion. When he goes up to the guy, he's like, "Hey, come over here. Hey, you got a bunch of land waiting for you. And a wife, but that's not necessary. If you don't want it, I'll take it."
Yeah, I thought that was actually kind of interesting too, that he talks about all the land, and you shall also inherit the Moabite woman.
To your point, he knows that he'll take it for the land, but he knows he won't take it because of
Right.
Yeah, maybe Boaz did that to kind of draw him out and kind of prove the point that he wasn't interested in fulfilling the whole thing, but only acquiring, what he did want. So.
Yeah, I also thought it was really interesting, and these are things we can't speculate and know all this sort of stuff, but I just thought it was interesting that here's a guy who's starting his day, going off to conduct his business for the day or whatever. He's just happening to pass by the gate, and his, relative, "Hey, come over here. I got a proposition for you." Yeah, want a wife?
Well, the
So,
thing is,
so in the moment, he's had to make this decision.
but Boaz knows both sides of this deal. This guy does too.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's in my mind. I think that's something we often overlook.
Right.
He hasn't already acted.
Right, and you bring a good point, because a lot of what Boaz knows is because of her reputation. The people know who she is. They know the story.
Yep.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
And, I would think that this is something that either they ought to know, they definitely ought to know, but they probably do know, which is that the genealogy picks up at the end of Ruth with Perez. And if you're following the genealogy, the seed of Abraham gets tracked through the book of Genesis all the way to Genesis 38 with Judah and Tamar. And then all of a sudden it stops. So you're following this promised seed line through Genesis, and it leaves off with Perez in Genesis 38 and never comes back up for the rest of the Pentateuch. And you're like, where's this promised seed that we're looking for? And all of a sudden at the end of Ruth it says, "Oh, and by the way, Elimelech was the descendant of Perez." And so it's the promised line. And I would think that Boaz knows that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would make sense. All right, well, we're going to end there.
I wanted you to do verse 11.
Pardon?
I wanted you to do verse 11.
Go ahead.
I wanted to hear you explain
What is verse 11? I can't remember.
Oh, you don't want to know.
And all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, "We are witnesses. May
No.
Yahweh grant the woman who is coming into your home to be like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel. And so you shall achieve excellence in Ephrathah, and shall proclaim your name in Bethlehem.
Wrong 11.
Deuteronomy.
Oh. I was like, well, that's a great verse.
It is 25,
Not quite the same though.
25:11 is not the same.
Mm.
Just wanted interpretation on
Now we're all looking it up, so.
Yeah, we'll study that, we'll leave that one for.
Okay.
George is teaching next week, he likes those verses.
Mark it, make sure he doesn't skip over it.
Yeah, so we'll tell George for picking up from 25:11.
Yeah.
I just don't want y'all to forget verse 12.
Oh.
I'm not very trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so George is scheduled to teach next week, pick up the next chapter. I'm not sure if he'll be able to or to be preparing this week because of, he's, caring for Karen this week.
Yeah.
So we'll play it by ear and see what happens next week. But next week we will be meeting out in the portable building, so don't forget that. You what?
11, at 11.
At 11 in second service. Yep, we're switching services, switching locations. So, all right, well, thank you guys very much. So thank you, Tyler, for your insights. Tyler's here we celebrated our granddaughter's birthday yesterday, so we're here for a birthday party.
Yeah, she's two.
It's hard to believe.
Happy birthday to me.
Yes, this morning we walked in and she just started singing, she's like, happy birthday to me. Happy birthday, Elena.
That's great.
Yeah.